Alrighty there, everyone. Thanks for watching. This is your host, IDJESTER. Today is fantasy book review time. And today I've got for you book 2 in the Lacanius trilogy by James Islington. This one is called An Echo of Things to Come. As I mentioned, it's book 2. I did a video review a little while back on book 1, The Shadow of What Was Lost, so be sure to check that out and see my thoughts and opinions on that book as well. So this is book 2, so we're going to get right into it and start talking about it. And it is a massive 716 pages, 49 chapters. So a good thick book that you can sink your teeth into. So things I liked about the book, I'm going to kind of go over those rather quickly because I want to talk more about the things I didn't like about the book. Not that they're more important than the things that I do like about the book. The reason I want to go into more detail about the things I don't like is because just because I don't like it doesn't mean that'll be a negative for you out there. So I want to explain why the things I didn't like, and you might not think of them as a negative, and so you might find that to be a positive. Personal preference. So things I did like, the main characters are interesting. They have good interactions between them, and the characters grow and evolve throughout the story. And they soon find that things aren't as they had thought they were going to be, and they have this great adventure to go on. And they find that they suddenly have more responsibilities and more importance to the events that go on around them. So good main characters are interesting. They're not just your regular fantasy guys. They are characters that can use essence and the magic sources in this world, and kind of figuring out what they can and cannot do, and how they can use that to their advantage, which is a nice, kind of as they evolve through the quest, through the story, they learn some of these things about themselves, and you learn it along with them. So that's really nice. There are parts in book 2 that are really really good. You can sit down and go through and read them rather quickly. You can go through 20 or 30 pages and not even, realize that that time is gone. It's very, some of the parts of this book are very interesting and very good. Real page turners, that you can sink your teeth into and just start enjoying and getting through. Lastly, things that I like are the world's an interesting place because of the difference between people that have special powers, the people that don't have the special powers, and of course, those people that are in control or monitor the people that do have the special powers. And it kind of makes you think about how this world evolved to get to this. How does their checks and balances, and how did they evolve to get that? And how would our world, if people started having special powers, how would there be a form of government or people that are supposedly monitoring and controlling over the people that have special powers? And um, each of these different level of people, whether you have powers or don't have powers, are viewed differently by each of the other. um, I'm trying not to give away any of the spoilers or any kind of information, but how are they viewed? If I had special powers, how do I view the people that are in control of me? And how do I view people that don't have special powers? And what can I do to be an asset to you? Or do you fear me? Or do you wish I would just go away? Do you want me to lose my special powers? If I was a person in that, you know, um, uh, was in charge of overseeing these people, monitoring them, and keeping them under control. How do I feel about these people? Do I feel like I'm now the one that's in charge because I control the people that do have the special powers? How am I viewed by them? And so there's this whole inner working and really kind of makes you wonder and think about how our world would evolve if people started having special powers, and would there be a special form of government? How would we control those people? What kind of restrictions would we put on? How would we enforce those restrictions when they have all this power that we can't control? So really interesting, and definitely a strength of this whole series. So now I'm going to kind of, like I said, I kind of glossed over the main things that I like, just because, again, I don't want to get into too many of those. I would rather talk about the things I didn't like, not because they're more important, but because the issues that I have with this book, you might not see them as issues, and I'd rather delve into them and give you more information about those and talk about all the positive things. Because if I say, oh, I like the character development and the interactions between the characters without giving you spoilers and things like that, it's hard to really explain that part of the book. So that's either something you're going to like or not like, and it's not going to really change your view on things based upon examples that I give you. But your things that you may or may not like about the book might change based upon how I explain the things that I don't like about the book and the reasons why behind them. So, things I didn't like about the book is, number one, this book is very, very confusing, and there's three reasons why, and I'm going to talk about those. So just there was several times that I was reading this book and I felt like I had no idea what just happened in these last 5 pages and what were they were talking about. Did I miss something? I am completely lost. Please explain it to me again because I have no idea. And the reasons these three things are is, number one, they find there is a book they find that gives you an alternate set of facts about the past. The people have been talking about the past and how these people got their powers and how to control them. And then you find this book and they read the book, and then they find out that some of the things they thought were true may not be true. And so now you have this, is this true? Is this not true? Kind of conflict. But then not only that, but then you also find a notebook that says, oh, wait a second. There is other information that I want to share with you that may alter your views on things again. So it can be a little confusing to keep track of what's real, what was just assumed from reading the book, and then what was changed because of the notebook. So it can be a little bit confusing there. Number two, there's different timelines that you're going to be involved with this book. You got the present time, the events that are unfolding, and then you keep going back into the past and seeing and hearing and reading about things that had happened in the past, and how is that going to be changed or not changed based upon the things that you had learned about what they think had really happened and how things changed because of the book. So again, there's all that confusion part there. Sometimes you're going to be jumping back hundreds of years and maybe even thousands of years back in the past, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Number two, there are some distracting side events, and there seems to be a lot of distracting side events. Instead of pushing the main plot forward, there seems to be too many side things that happened that aren't explained enough to really make them part of the story or important in the story, but yet they take up a lot of time and effort that happen. And it's not just one or two things that happen. It seems to be a whole, I would say many times where there's side things that come up, which is sometimes great in a fantasy novel, right? I mean, you like surprises coming out of nowhere, but like for example, one of the main characters spends basically 2 chapters meeting up with trying to figure out who these characters are that are following him. So he spends like 1 chapter telling people that he's being followed. He wants to find out who it is, set up a trap for them, and then finally meets them, and it ends up being 2 other main side characters. They're not the main characters, but I would call them, the main side characters. You've read about them in the book one, and they end up being in book two. And it just seemed like a big wasted time because I could have just, walked up and said, "Hey, you're so and so. I know so and so. You know so and so, and that person told me to get with you." So it seemed like these side things that happened just distracted from getting the story going and moving it forward. So too many distracting side events. This is a biggie, number 3, and this is something I really want to talk about, so I want to delve into this one. One of the characters has lost his memories, and he has to relearn them. And in that self is not a bad thing. That can be actually a good thing. It can bring in some intrigue in this character. It can bring some just desire for him to make choices, not knowing things in his past. Okay, this book handles it really, really bad, in my opinion. Okay, number one reason is because we go into this big long explanation about you lost your memories, and it's going to literally take me forever to try to explain to you the things you do because you won't believe who you are and the things you've done. You won't believe the things you are or who you are with the things you've done, right? So it goes on to this and then, goes, I can't do this. It's going to be way too much to try and explain to you. You're just going to have to learn. You're going to have to try and remember things yourself. You're just going to have to relearn who you are and deal with it that way. So the first part is that they say this, this big intro of, we're going to have to teach you some things, but you're going to have to really learn who you are because you won't believe who we are. And I just don't find that true, right? Literally, I say to you, dude, you're a bad, bad man. And you've done a lot of bad, bad things. Boom, I just explained you. Now, you might not believe me, right? But after you have these flashbacks and you see a few things, you're going to say, wow, you're right. Okay? Or no, you're not right, but you'll know. And I basically, they get on this big whole kick about, oh, this is going to be too hard to explain to you and blah, blah, blah. And the second part of this is there is probably, in this 716-page book, there's probably 12 to 15 flashbacks that you will go through with this character, right? And this is going to help me explain why this character that loses his mind is an issue, right? So you're going to have about 12 to 15 flashbacks. And these flashbacks are going to take you to places. He's going to meet people you have no idea about. These places you have no idea about. The things he talks about you have no idea about. The philosophies that they talk about you have no idea about. Everything that he does during these flashbacks, okay? First flashback, okay, he sees, oh man, second flashback, maybe third flashback. All of a sudden, shouldn't he realize, man, that guy was right. I am a really bad man, right? And I've done some bad things in my past, but that's not who I am anymore. And, I can explain to you in like 10 seconds. Don't spend a chapter and a half of the book or more talking to him saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be way too hard. After the dude has like one or two flashbacks, he should know who he was and what he'd done because he has the knowledge of history just like everyone else does. But still, if somebody says to me, oh, you're a bad man, if I didn't know who I was, you're a bad man, you've done bad things, and I don't believe them. After I have one flashback, oh, okay. And I have two flashbacks, oh, geez. After three flashbacks, we're talking 12 to 15 flashbacks that go and take time out of your reading to go on these things so he can learn things about himself. And let me tell you, those were the most annoying parts of this book, and it kept happening over and over and over again. It's just like, okay, you know when they're coming up because the text turns to italicized text, and you know they're coming up, and I just was like, oh, I cannot stand another one of these. That was just over the top the amount of times these flashback sequence went, and it's like page after page after page of this event that happened, and you learn one little tiny thing. Why did it take, I think it was badly done because I shouldn't have taken like 15 different times for him to go back. Have like one chapter or something, and he just goes back and relives all those memories or something. It's just over and over and over and over again throughout this whole book. He has these flashbacks, and for me, it drove me crazy because the people we meet, we have no idea who these people are. The events, okay, so they unfold, but you don't know the reason behind them, why they were done, and it tries to give you information. You start meeting characters that you don't know about. Their names are mentioned once or twice, and then like 2 or 3 times down the line, you'll have another flashback. Maybe 6 or 10 chapters later, and you'll have another flashback, and it'll be another 100 pages where this character's name is mentioned again, and you got to remember that it was back. It is like his second flashback, and during that part of the time of his life that happened, and what was going on during that part of the time. And then he'll have another flashback that goes to a different part of time and a different part of time, and you got to try and remember who was in what section of time, and what were they good, were they bad, were they helpful, well, who were they, what were their names. And that's again goes back to why this book was confusing. But these flashback sections were just, for me, they were over the top, and just I started, the first couple were, the first one was okay. The second was, okay, all right, I get it. Third one, again, dude, how many times we got to try to show you bad things that had happened? Now, there was more that he had to try to remember. He basically had a plan that he needed to do something. I'm trying to be as spoiler free as I can. So he had a plan. So he had to try and figure out what his plan was by having all these flashbacks. But he should have, like I said, had like one chapter of flashbacks or something. But man, oh man, these things were just, they're terrible, they're long, they were boring, and they happen throughout the book. In fact, the book ends with a flashback that he has. That's how bad it is. The last thing you read is a flashback of this dude and things that he learns. And it's just, I just cannot explain to you how how annoying they become throughout this book. All right, so that was about the character that lost his memories. Again, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that to have that character, but the flashbacks, the people, the names, the places that you have no care about, you don't know anything about them, their philosophies, part of the time the characters he meets are giving him information about something you have no idea what the heck it is, or the philosophies of what was going on during that time are different than the philosophies that are currently going on in the story. And learning what had happened in the past so he can kind of change how things were going to be set up for the present time. But it's like you don't really care about what had happened to these people in the past. You lose connection because it happens over and over and over again. And it's just, they were really, it wasn't like a 1 page or 2 page thing. Some of these were like 8 to 10 pages long. And it's just that those 8 or 10 pages are just so we can learn like one little tiny detail. And it seems like the author use those times just to give you a little chunk of the piece of the puzzle, little piece of the puzzle, little piece of the puzzle. He didn't want to give you too much because you might be able to figure something out. He wanted to lead you on. That's the way I kept feeling, like he was leading you on, making you want to keep reading to find out more about the puzzle. But trust me, it did not, for me, did not lead me to want to continue. There was several, probably 10 times in this book that I thought, oh, I'm not going to finish. There's no way I'm going to finish this book. I cannot stand these sequences anymore. And when you're flipping through the book and you're going through 30 or 40 pages really quickly, like I said, there's some interesting parts and the characters are interacting, the story's moving forward, and it's not some of these. And then you flip the next page and you see the italics text. And you just go, oh my God, no, not another time sequence. Oh my God, really? And you're in for 10 to 12 pages of something that you can care less about, people you don't know about, and you quickly learn to, I guess, stop caring about what had happened in this character's past at all, which really takes away from the book as a whole. And that's why I think it's an issue of those memory lapses. Um, let's see. All right, so that's number 3. Number 4, characters is split up now. In book number 1, right, The Shadow of What Was Lost, the main characters basically stayed together throughout the story, most of it anyways. And then, kind of towards the end, they had to split up and they each had things they needed to do. And now they're all separated doing their own thing, which is great and fine. There's nothing, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But the only problem is each chapter in the book is basically what happens to that character during your time. And you can have with 4 main characters going on at this time, 3 or 4 what I call the main side characters going on. Um, you might have a chapter where it ends on a cliffhanger, which happens pretty much all, half of the chapters end in the cliffhanger, and you might not get back to that character in like 150 pages because you've had 3 or 4 or 5 chapters of somebody, other characters and what's going on with them, and then you finally get back to this character and you have to try to remember where they were, what they were doing, what their event was happening, and sometimes it takes that climactic event away because it's not character ending the chapter. You go to bed, get up the next day, and then you decide to read the next chapter to find out what happens, right? You have to go like 60 or 80 or 100 pages sometimes just to get to the next chapter of that character. And it can be daunting to get back to them and try and remember. Again, this goes back to why the book was confusing, is because you have all these characters doing their thing, which is, again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you, you're going to have these climactic moments that are ruined because you have to wait 3 or 4 chapters to get to the character to find out what happened. And then you got to remember where they were, what had happened to them. And I find that there was several really important things that kind of happened at the end of one of these chapters. And then when I went back, you finally get to the point where that character's next chapter comes and you were like, yeah, okay, I remember that. Oh, okay, that was the answer. But it wasn't like this big moment. It was like, oh, yeah, that's what was going on because you completely forgot about what was doing. So unless you read like 150, 200 pages, if you spend like 3 or 4 hours sitting down reading and you can cover 150 pages in this book in a sitting, then maybe, you might not find that as a negative. But for me, it was a big negative. So take that for what it's worth. Number 5. There are situations that come up in this book that were written in what I feel is an unbelievable manner, which takes away from the events. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about. There's one situation where there's several characters and they're basically cleaning up after a battle and they're taking all the bodies and they're piling them into a big stack because they want to burn the bodies, and then they have to leave and get out of this place and head back to where they're going, but they don't just want to leave the bodies laying around. So they're gathering up all the bodies, they're dousing them with liquid so they can light them up and everything. All fine and hunky-dory up to that point. Then, All of a sudden, one of the bodies starts to move and climbs out of the pile of bodies. And they can see that this thing is not like a normal person. It's not like somebody just woke up, right? It still has these weapons that were stuck in them, sticking out of them. And, so, it's not like, oh, there's Bob. Bob's alive. Let's talk to Bob, right? No, it's not like that. It's like, oh, who's this thing and where did he come from? Right? And they have the liquid, they're ready to these bodies, but somehow, some way, this thing surprises them, right? Surprises them and comes over and does something bad to one of the characters. And they're like, oh, we're surprised. We didn't know you were coming and all this. And I just find that so hard to believe. It's like it was written really in an unbelievable manner, right? If just think, if I know it's fantasy and things happen in a fantasy world, but you also have reality to worry about. If I'm gathering up bodies and I'm stacking them up, right? And then we're going to light the bodies on fire. If a body starts moving and starts coming towards me, I can see weapons sticking out of them or whatever, okay? I'm going to run or I'm going to, pull my sword out and attack it or whatever. It's not going to surprise me and be able to do something to me, right? If the author wanted that bad event to happen, right, he could have done it in a much more realistic manner. Okay, they're gathering up the bodies, you're hauling them over to the thing, the guy comes alive, does his thing, and then the bad thing happens in a more believable manner, right? I don't believe that this body crawls out of the pile, comes after them, they're standing there with torches, right? Ready to light the thing on fire. So they're obviously looking at the pile. So it wasn't like they were, you know, cooking dinner or doing something else. They're standing there looking at the pile. So how does this thing surprise them, be able to walk up and cause this bad event to happen and have them be like, oh my gosh. And then the next thing they do, they light the thing on fire, right? If the bad event is going to happen, then you write it in a manner, and I'm sorry, I got to itch my foot. Then you got to write it in a manner that makes it believable. I'm gathering the bodies up, and we're gathering the bodies up. We're stacking them on the thing. Somebody turns their back, crawls out, gets you, whatever. Something more believable than we're standing there ready to light the things on fire, and the body comes out and surprises us. That's just one, right? Number two, I can't get into specifics, but there are several times in this novel that the main characters could have been killed or something bad happened to them. But the villain doesn't actually, the several villains don't take that opportunity to have those bad events happen to the characters, right? And then later on, you find out the reason for this is the evil villain, when they confront the evil villain later, they say, "Oh well, I didn't do anything to you because I saw how I foresaw how important you were and to the story, and I was going to need you later, so I didn't do anything to you at that time." Okay, you can't give the reader a sense of danger, a sense of uh, threat when the bad guys keep doing this where, oh well, I'm not going to kill you because I might need you later. They don't tell you that. They don't do anything to the main characters, and then it seems like the author was like, oh well, how am I gonna, oh, I gotta clear this up now because they need to meet this character later. And so the answer is, well, I needed you later and I foresaw how important you were going to be, so I couldn't do anything to you back then. Well, it takes the reader way out of your book because now you're really you're asking the reader to believe things that just doesn't make sense. Just like I again, I know it's a fantasy world, fantasy setting, anything can happen. That's why we love it, and that's why it's interesting. But zombies crawling out of a pile, attacking people that are standing there ready to light the fire is not believable. They're not going to surprise them. come up with a better way to have the event happen, make it more believable. Same thing with these villains. If there's a reason they don't kill that person, give them a reason for not killing that person other than, well, I foresaw that I would need you later. That's kind of a cop out. I think it was used way too much in this book. Um, so those, again, I can't get into too many specifics because of, it ruins some of the story, and I don't want to ruin the story for you guys. So, all right, so that is the things that I like and dislike about An Echo of Things to Come by James Islington, book 2 of the Lucanius trilogy. So let's give you my final review and my final thoughts on it now. You've kind of heard me rambling about it. So what are my final thoughts? So I gave A Shadow of What Was Lost, right? I gave this book a 5 out of 5, highest grade that you can give a book. I love that book. It was interesting, the character development, there's a ton of world building, adventure. There's adventure, there was mystery, there was so much to love about that book, and I was really, really, really looking forward to continuing that on with An Echo of Things to Come and continuing the story on in somewhat of a similar fashion. Unfortunately, An Echo of Things to Come was written completely different. The characters are not separated, so they're all on their own separate adventures. They have this character now that has to remember everything about his past and try to figure out what his plan was for the story moving forward, which really drags the story down for me over and over. Again, if it was just a couple times, I can get into that. I was into it the first half dozen times, but when it's repeating it over and over and over again, and the thing is, he only learns like one little tiny thing that helps him each time he goes back. And to me, that seems like a cop out. You could have gone just a few times back where he learns a bunch of things that he needs to know going forward. But the author decided to use these over and over and over again. And like I said, they became painful to read. They were boring. They were long. They took you to places you didn't care about, places that people you met that you have no idea who they were. It just added to the confusion about what was going on in this book, the timelines, who they were, etc., etc. Because of that, this book is much more slow paced because of the constant flashbacks, which really don't add to the story after the first couple of times. If I was this character and I lost my memory, somebody tells me, dude, you're a bad man, you've done a lot of bad things. After one or two flashbacks, and I see what had happened, I start to say, oh yeah, you're right. Okay. I see what you're saying. So the big cop out of, oh, it's going to take us too long to explain it to you, you're just going to have to figure out yourself, is a bunch of hogwash that the author used to have you read through his flashbacks. But like I said, after a few of them, it got to be where you didn't care about these flashbacks, the story, what he thought about, where his past was, and even thought about missing these sections, but I didn't. Um, the constant side adventures add little value to the story other than dragging it down, slowing its pace down. There are occasional parts of this book that are written really well and in an unbelievably good manner. But the lack of moving the story forward and dragging the book down compared to what the first book, A Shadow of What Was to Come. I came very, very close to DNFing this. I thought about it seriously. I thought about it about 10 times. So I thought seriously about it about 5 times. But I got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm 380 pages in. It's like halfway. It's got to get better. It's got to get better. And I'd read some more, and another few days would go by, and then I would say, wait a second, it's not getting any better. Come on. I mean, give me a break. Are you going to really waste your time continuing this? But I stuck through it time after time. And the worst part about this, the worst thing about that is with just 70 pages left in the book. About 70 to 80 pages left in this book. I got to the point again where I seriously considered DNFing it. So close, 716 pages, and I was just 70 or 80 pages from the end, and I was still like, is it worth my time to finish these last 70 pages where I could spend it doing something else? But I stuck it through, which I'm happy to say that I did. So I did not DNF this. I read the whole thing, even the passages, even the flashbacks and everything else. But in the end, I just don't think it was worth it. So for all those reasons, it breaks my heart to say that I'm going to give an Echo of Things to Come a 2.5 stars out of 5. I'm only going to give this 2.5 stars, which if you go back and watch my review of A Shadow of What Was Lost, I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. There's my camera. 5 out of 5. For this one, I'm giving it a 2.5. It is taking a big, big drop off for me. I was really, really looking forward to this book. Maybe I went in with high expectations, but it just didn't do it for me. Now, with that said, most people really, really like this book. If you go to Amazon right now, it is rated at 4.5 out of 5 stars, with 72% giving it a 5 out of 5 rating. 72% of people out there gave this a 5 out of 5 star rating. Okay? So I want people to know that, because I don't want them to say, oh, I'm not going to get this because of what IDJESTER said. Okay? I'm giving you my views on the book. You take them for whatever you want. I would go watch some more reviews, go read some more reviews on the Amazon site. There are people that absolutely love this book to death. Like I said, came very, very close to, even with 70 pages left, to DNFing this book, because it was just, I was so confused, so lost. Who's doing what? Is this the real time frame, or how am I supposed to care about this character that keeps going back and back and having these flashbacks and meeting people that I have no idea who they are, learning about things from an age past that's supposed to help him? It's just the pacing of this book. Not much happened in 716 pages. I would say probably 250 of those pages are going to be flashback memories, which are not going to lead to um, furthering the story along. It's going to help, Joe Blow figure out what his plan was, but it's not going to further the story along. So while he's having all these flashbacks, you can't have the characters furthering the story along, because that wouldn't match things up. So the main characters spend their whole time doing all these side things that happen, right? They spend all their time doing these side things that don't really advance the main plot along. They do all these other things that are not important to what had happened in the long run, because one of the main characters is having these flashbacks that he's got to figure everything out. So the other characters can't advance the story if he can't help them figure it out and advance the story, which he doesn't do throughout the whole book, because the last chapter is him having a flashback. The 15th flashback of the thing. And so that really, really just takes away from the book. But like I said, people out there, they love it to death. You might love it to death. 4.5 average score, 72% rated at a 5 out of 5 book. So there is obviously a lot to love about this book. But I'm gonna give it my final score. 2.5 is my final score for this. Now, there is book 3 coming out, so you might be interested, am I going to read book 3? And that is a great question. Book 3 is called The Light of All That Falls. It is now released. My plan was to finish book 2. I read book 1, right? My plan was to read book 2 and then get book 3 when it came out so I can pick it up and continue it on. And book 3 was released, but now I'm at the point where I'm in a dilemma, right? Because book 1 was so good, book 2 for me was so bad. Is book 3 going to be on the good end or is it going to be on the bad end? I've got so many other books sitting here waiting to read, and I don't want to feel like I wasted my time like I did with this one. For me, it would have been much better to stop at A Shadow of What Was Lost than to spend the time reading this book. I put other books aside so I could finish book 2 because I knew book 3 was coming out and I wanted to have book 2 done so that I could just go right into book 3 and, get that ordered and get that ready to go, and then I'd be able to do book 2 and then book 3. So I put other books aside, and for me personally, it was a waste of my time to read book 2. I did not enjoy it. At very little did I enjoy in book number 2. The character development wasn't there because they're all doing their own thing. They're all on their own side adventures, doing their own thing with different people now, right? So less character interactions and development there. You meet some new characters, which kind of add some things to the story, but all these things that are happening are not moving the plot forward because you have this other main character who has to remember everything now, and he has to have all these 15 flashbacks that just take forever to go through. And for me, it would have been better for me just to read something else and just stop with book 1. I Like I said, I came even with 70 pages to go. I'm like, I might just not continue this. I just might not because it just doesn't seem like it. I kept wishing and hoping. And the reason I didn't DNF it was because I kept wishing and hoping it's going to get better. Book 1 was awesome. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. Please get better. And I kept wishing and hoping it would get better. The dream sequences has got to, these flashbacks have got to stop. I know they're going to stop. Sooner or later, he'll figure it out, and we won't have to worry about that. We can progress things forward. For those people that love it out there, I more the power to you. I have nothing but nice things to say about you if you love this book. But for me, it was not a great experience, and I would definitely I would not recommend it if you find things that I said is a negative. If you find these to be valid points, then I would not get it if I was you. Confusion. The book is confusing because of those reasons we talked about. So many distracting things because they can't push the story forward too fast. The fact that there's all these flashback sequences to take you to places and people you don't know about. The characters have been now split up, so it might be some of your favorite characters now. They're not going to be able to interact as much. They're only going to see each other maybe once or twice in the whole book, and their interactions are very short. And then the things that are written in an unbelievable manner just really distract. Now, maybe I'm nitpicking on things because of my general feeling of the book, and maybe the fact that this body crawled out of the corpse pile and surprised the characters to have something bad happen. For me, maybe because I have a bad taste in my mouth because of this book, maybe that seems like a big thing. For you, it might not be a big thing. Maybe it's okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, when I'm reading it, I would like it to be, you know, um, something that I can believe in. There are so many ways to do that. You know, the 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 characters are getting ready to leave. They're packing things up. The body comes out. Nobody's looking. Nobody's watching, and he ends up stabbing a character in the back or something. That's believable, right? Or you're carrying the body over, and then all of a sudden, the the eyes open, and then he's like, grabs the person and kills him, right? There's believable ways to do it, but if I'm standing there and I'm getting ready to light this thing on fire, and something starts crawling out of there, what the hell? It's not going to surprise me. It's not going to surprise anybody. We're not going to be like, oh, what is this thing here? It's just not believable. That's just one of the things. There are many, like I said, many examples. Character could have been killed. Oh, no, no, no. We're going to let him live. You don't find out for like 3 chapters till it's his next time to come up. Then you realize, oh, he's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And then later on, he confronts the villain. Well, you could have killed me back then. Oh, but, I didn't because I knew I needed you later on. Really? Oh, okay. Well, why didn't you just freaking tell me that? 2.5 stars, and I think that's being generous. Probably, I don't know if maybe The Shadow of What Was Lost is not as good as I thought it was. Maybe I should go back and, read a few of these chapters just to see. Maybe I went in with rose-tinted glasses, and maybe it's not as good as I was thinking it was. But definitely, for me, I'm one of the few that do not enjoy An Echo of Things to Come. There are reviews out on this book on YouTube. There are several that praise the book. There are several that are not very good on the, talk about its problems or issues as well. So check out those reviews as well and listen to what they have to say. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching, guys. It's IDJESTER. We'll see you next time. Till then, take care.